You cheated on me while I was on a business trip, didn't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave right now.
That was my husband, Jackson, yelling over the phone. Normally, this would be a shocking event, but I knew he was making a fuss over something that wasn't true. I sighed and retorted, I already sold it, you know?
What?
I could sense his emotions wobbling on the other end. Did he really think I wouldn't catch on to his little scheme? His thinking was too naive. I was initially boiling with anger, but hearing his careless response made me chuckle. And then I thought, now it's my turn. This is the story of how my good-for-nothing husband tried to deceive me, and how I turned the tables on him. My name is Olivia. I'm a 28-year-old working mom. Even though I say working mom, I've been employed at a college store since I was 20, right after graduating from a junior college. Jackson, 2 years my senior, now works in an office at a construction company. But 3 years ago, when we met, he was unemployed. He quit his first job right after graduating from college because it wasn't a good fit. After that, he hopped from job to job with periods of doing nothing. That's when he met me and proposed within a few months. Okay, but there's a condition. Upon hearing this, Jackson looked worried.
What is it?
You need to find a stable job. Otherwise, marriage is out of the question. We need to think about our future.
Oh, look, of course. But you're working, so there's no rush, right?
My parents would worry if I married a man without a job. Find one before we get married. Seeing my stern expression, Jackson sighed in resignation.
All right, I'll find one. Then you'll marry me?
Yes. And so, albeit reluctantly, Jackson began his job hunt and landed an office job at a construction company. We got married. Back then, I thought of Jackson as a bit careless when it came to money and work. He'd quit jobs on a whim, or think lightly of financial issues even when considering marriage. But he was always willing to listen when I spoke seriously. I believed that after marriage I could educate him. I thought that I could teach Jackson where he lacked, and in return he would compensate for my shortcomings. Together, we'd make a great couple. But it wasn't that simple. Jackson's carelessness seemed to be inherited from his parents. About a year into our marriage, when we were house hunting and considering a mortgage, Jackson dropped a bombshell.
I might not be able to get a loan.
What? When I asked him to clarify, he casually said,
I checked, and because I haven't been at my job long, I might need a guarantor for the loan. The only person I could ask is my dad, but he's got gambling debts, and they're pretty big, so he probably can't be a guarantor.
Why didn't you tell me this earlier?
I was flabbergasted, especially with the contract and the real estate agent right in front of us.
But Jackson, seemingly unbothered, said,
If we put the house in your name, it'll be fine, right? You've been at your job forever, so you can get the loan. We'll both pay it off. It's just a formality.
That's not the point. Why didn't you discuss this with me? This is a big deal for me too. I'm not even prepared with the paperwork. He did apologize, hands clasped in a gesture of regret, but his demeanor lacked sincerity. I wanted to argue, but considering the already prepared contract and the agent present, I thought it best not to escalate the situation. Reluctantly, I hurriedly prepared the necessary documents, like my income statement, for the loan application. While I impulsively bought the house under my name, I quickly became anxious. Could I really live with this man in the future? Maybe I should have just said, then we won't buy it, instead of rushing to prepare the documents. Adding to my anxiety was the issue with my parents-in-law.
The other day, I talked to Dad.
Jackson began.
He said he might lose the house because of the debt I mentioned before. So he wants to live with us. That's okay, right?
What? Why would you think that? Even though I responded sternly, Jackson just laughed it off.
Well, he's in trouble. My brother is single, but he's working abroad. I'm the only one he can rely on.
Isn't that something we should seriously discuss? Maybe he can stay until he finds a place, but living with us permanently is a big decision. Jackson frowned.
You just don't want to live with him, right? If he stays, we can split the living costs. You're always complaining about money.
You mean the money you never contribute? You said we'd split the mortgage, but it's only being deducted from my salary. You haven't given me your share.
Married couples share their money. It's not just your money, it's ours. It's just being deducted from your account because the house is in your name.
Stop being so selfish. I raised my voice and Jackson just said,
I hate talking about money,
and left the room. Such arguments became frequent. Each time, Jackson would dismiss my concerns and eventually walk away. Nothing was resolved. However, Jackson wasn't completely inactive regarding his family's issues. Due to his job in construction site administration, he had many contracts in real estate. He frequently consulted a particular agency about selling his family home for the best price and the steps involved. I've been thinking about selling the house for a good price, but how can I get the best deal? If I decide to sell in the future, what should I do? I've heard this topic discussed over and over. It was a relief to realize that I wasn't the only one pondering this. But the idea of living with us after selling the house, as if it's a given, always worried me. Jackson started meeting with real estate agencies and my parents-in-law without me, and he began spending more weekends away from home. Then Jackson had to go on a business trip for several months. He had to stay near the construction site because it was far away until the building was completed. I didn't realize it then, but our tug-of-war had already begun. A few days after Jackson left for his trip, I went out for tea after shopping.
Hello there.
The man who greeted me looked familiar. Recalling past memories, I remembered him as someone Jackson once brought home. He worked at a real estate company Jackson dealt with, a young employee named Samuel. Jackson mentioned he was a newbie, having been with the company for less than a year. Oh, hello. You visited our house before, right?
Yes, I'm sorry for dropping by unannounced and even having a meal. My apologies.
No worries, I should have been more hospitable. We ended up having tea together. Samuel was very friendly and seemed more sensible than Jackson, despite his youth. We chatted over tea and soon parted ways. At that moment, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this brief encounter would later be labeled as cheating. That moment came when Jackson accused me.
You cheated on me while I was away, didn't you? We're getting a divorce. Give that house to my parents and leave now.
The first thing that crossed my mind was that the rumors were true. Jackson had spread the story that I was cheating, aiming for a divorce. The one who informed me about this was none other than Samuel, the man Jackson falsely labeled as my affair. He visited my house the day after our tea.
I'm sorry for the sudden visit. About yesterday, Jackson asked me to get close to you.
What? I was shocked and confused. I invited him in and listened to his story. Jackson wanted to frame me for cheating to get a divorce. He asked Samuel to fabricate evidence. There were two reasons Jackson wanted a divorce. First, to take the house from me. Worried about my parents-in-law's house, Jackson thought it would be easiest to live there with his parents. But I opposed living together, so he planned to kick me out and claim the house. The second reason was his own affair. While claiming to discuss things with my parents-in-law, he spent weekends with his mistress. He was so infatuated with her that he saw me, his wife, as an obstacle. By framing me for cheating, he thought he could also get compensation in a divorce settlement. I always thought Jackson wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but he sure was cunning in the worst ways. Despicable! As I muttered, Samuel apologized.
But I never intended to help Jackson. I didn't want to be used for such a terrible scheme. So I pretended to cooperate, planning to turn the tables on him.
Samuel then offered various advice, leveraging his real estate knowledge. Finally, he suggested,
"You should sell the house while Jackson is away on his trip."
When Jackson heard the words, "I sold it," all he could muster was a confused, "What?" He seemed at a loss for words. I decided to twist the knife further. I heard everything from Samuel. He even recorded you were trying to make it look like I was cheating on you with him. If we divorce now, I can claim alimony in court. Jackson just kept repeating,
"What? What?"
But I had another ace up my sleeve. You might not have noticed, but Samuel isn't just any new employee. He's the son of the company's CEO.
What?
His shock was even more evident now. How could he be so clueless? I had no idea who I was dealing with. Don't you realize Samuel shares the same last name as the CEO? How did you miss that?
Well, Samuel's last name isn't exactly a rare last name. Wait, are you joking?
No, I'm not. Jackson's shock was evident. Samuel's company was one of Jackson's most important clients. Moreover, they had helped Jackson with his family home matters. If the boss heard about this, Jackson would be in deep trouble. Actually, Samuel had already reported it.
Hey, come on. Alright, I'll check it out. If you're lying, I'll know right away.
With that, Jackson hung up. A few minutes later, he realized the irreversible damage he had done. Afterwards, the real estate company run by Samuel's dad refused to do business with Jackson or advise him about his family home. Since I had sold my house, Jackson had no choice but to return to his family home after his business trip. Of course, when I sold my house, Samuel had introduced me to an affordable apartment, so I had no issues. As I started the divorce process, Jackson kept reaching out.
I'm sorry, Olivia. Please forgive me.
It's too late now. You tried to use someone to trap me. Why would I believe anything you say?
Don't say that.
After we divorce, you can marry that other woman, right? That's what you wanted, isn't it?
Yes, but she apparently had someone else she liked and dumped me.
What a pathetic story. Just because of that, don't change your attitude and come running back to me. I hung up the phone with a sigh. I hadn't told him where I currently lived to keep him away, but he kept calling non-stop. Every time he'd beg,
"Don't leave me, help me, I'll be a good husband."
And I was fed up with his empty promises. Once the divorce is finalized, I can delete his number, block him on WhatsApp, and cut ties completely. To top it off, even my mother-in-law called pleading. Please, Olivia, we'll be in trouble without you. It's not me you wanted, it's the house, right? But there's no house anymore. We didn't just want the house, we're not that terrible. Come here and you'll see. You wanted the money, didn't you? That's not true, you're so mean. You tried to force me to live with you, and when I refused, Jackson tried to trap me to get compensation in the divorce. I can't trust someone like that. It's clear you're after the money. As I kept refusing, my father-in-law called and arrogantly said,
"Isn't it your duty as a daughter-in-law to serve my wife a little?"
Are you really saying that? Isn't all of this because of the debt you created? When I responded firmly, his voice on the phone became so loud it hurt my ears.
You heartless woman, abandoning your mother-in-law in her time of need and blaming her? I'll kill you, you cruel woman!
I hung up the phone and, with the recorded audio in hand, consulted my lawyer. It turned out that my father-in-law's words could be considered a threat, so I told Jackson I'd sue him if he didn't agree to the divorce. Panicking, Jackson had no choice but to consent to the divorce. Finally, I was able to sever ties with that outrageous family. After the divorce, Jackson lost trust at work and was hardly given any responsibilities. Moreover, since the debt issue wasn't resolved, he had to sell his family home at a low price. Now, he lives in a cheap apartment with his parents. His salary has decreased since he's not trusted with significant tasks. On top of that, he has to pay me alimony. He's struggling, having to support his parents in this situation. I heard all of this from Samuel. Yes, Samuel and I still keep in touch. He suggested I use my customer service skills from the clothing store where I used to work in his HR department. They had an opening and were looking for someone with strong communication skills. After much thought and consultation, I accepted the offer and switched to the real estate company. Samuel and I continued our close relationship, which eventually turned romantic. After dating for a year, we got married. I became the wife of the future company president. Jackson probably never imagined that the two people he tried to frame for an affair would end up getting married. My new family, including my in-laws, are wonderful people. I plan to build a beautiful life together with Samuel.